Um,
Mm.
so I'd say like this week it was kind of we didn't have a whole lot of expectations for a lot of what we watched, but I think we had slightly more expectations for our second movie,
Yes.
Death Wish 2. Do you,
Yes.
do you believe in Jesus? Because you're gonna meet him.
Yeah.
That one line is why, despite some recommendations I had,
Mhm.
uh, I opted to have us not skip it and go right to three because it sounds like three is where the series just embraces how ridiculous it is.
Yes. Yeah. I believe three is where Paul Kersey, Charles Bronson shoots a guy with a grenade launcher.
So, so for those of you who didn't catch the original Death Wish review we did,
Mhm.
we were both kind of pleasantly surprised by it because there are some movies that just get movie series that just get kind of a reputation, and I'd always gotten the impression that this was a completely ridiculous series. And the answer is, at least going by the first one, no, it's a partially ridiculous series.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause the first movie was definitely is darker, dark and gritty, with some underlying social commentary, and some very good acting performances.
A unique soundtrack.
Unique soundtrack, yeah. Um, and then which I'm trying to remember what year that came out. Was it 74, 75?
74 sounds right. Let's find
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Death Wish movie. 1974. You were
74.
correct.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so this movie, and then for some reason, 8 years later, they decided to do a sequel to this movie because, probably because the producers on the movie, Golan and Globus, who are the guys from Canon Films, wanted to do a sequel.
Okay. It, it's all coming together now. What was the first one also Canon Films?
I don't believe so. No, I think that was Paramount.
Okay. It's all coming together.
Yeah, yeah. For those of you who don't know, Canon Films was an independent studio in the mostly in the 80s. They were very they did a lot of very low budget schlocky B movies, mostly action. Chuck Norris, a lot of Chuck Norris's movies were Canon movie films.
Wasn't Superman 4 a Canon movie?
Yes. Uh, yeah, yeah. As was Masters of the Universe, with Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella.
Okay, so having that little bit of extra information, first off, it explains why the producers' names were so prominently all over the credits.
Yeah.
But also, it explains why this kind of went schlocky.
Yes. Yes, this movie, very schlocky and more exploitative. Um, so I guess we'll get into the plot.
Quick summary for those who missed Death Wish 1 somehow.
Mm,
So, it's a vigilante movie, and I always just think of him as Charles Bronson, so I never actually remember his name in the
uh,
movie.
Paul.
Paul. So Paul was a mild-ish mannered architect. I say mild-ish mannered because he was a crack shot from his military days.
Hmm.
But he'd moved on with his life. Everything was going great. He had a successful architectural firm. He had a loving wife and daughter. The daughter had a useless husband who did not make his way into the second movie.
No.
Um, and everything was great until one day a group of toughs just randomly decide one of them who was Jeff Goldblum
Yeah.
decide to follow him home and uh, find out where he lives. And was he in the building at the time in that one?
No, he wasn't there. I think he
That's
was
right.
at work.
That's right. They go in there and they proceed to violently
uh,
Violent, the
Beef.
daughter and mother.
Yes,
Uh,
the wife, the wife died, and then daughter became basically catatonic from the trauma.
and so he proceeded to, after some soul searching, after some misadventures in the Southwest, he decides that he's just going to be judge, jury, and executioner for everybody who goes around uh, participating in the 1970s New York crime wave.
Yes, yeah,
Uh, And the movie kind of, you know, it kind of delves into kind of the effects of having that type of predator of criminals around. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and they did the although the local police figure out who he is, they don't want to make a martyr of him, so they politely suggest that he go find somewhere else to live. However, at the end of the last movie, that was Chicago. This
Mhm.
movie takes place in Los Angeles, likely because that's where the Canon offices were and it was cheaper to shoot in Los Angeles, if I
Yes,
had to guess.
yeah,
Because I don't care who you are. In the 70s, oh, yeah, yeah, I want to get away from crime and, and everything. I'll go to Los Angeles. Perfect.
oh yeah,
To be fair, Chicago is also kind of a lateral move, but that's neither here nor there.
yeah. But yeah, so Paul's in L.A. And he's his life is kind of getting back to normal. He moved his daughter out there too, and his daughter seems to be getting better, even though she's not talking. Um, he's got a new girlfriend who's a reporter at a radio station where he's friends with the owner, and he's working on building a new building for the guy.
Mhm.
But then when he's out and about with his girlfriend and his daughter, he runs afoul of some hoodlums. They mug him and take his wallet, but he chases one of them down, beats him up, and
That,
just
that
kind
was the
of
one who was played by Lawrence Fishburne, right?
no, it's a different one. The Lawrence
Okay.
Fishburne was the one who had the like Geordie LaForge
Oh, that's
visor.
right. That's right.
Yeah. And But he doesn't do anything to him, and then of course uh, they get mad because he chased down and beat one of them up. So of course, they have his wallet, they have his driver's license, so they have his address. You can probably guess where this is going. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was just looking up the actors. Thomas Duffy played the character Nirvana, who was kind of the final boss of the gang.
Oh, the big guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, like the last one standing, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, Apparently, he was a paleontologist in the Lost World Jurassic Park. So these movies have a weird tie to the Jurassic Park series.
Yeah. Wow.
But
Oh man.
anyhow, yeah. So so here's the thing. In the previous movie, the event was kind of shocking and unexpected, and some details happened, but it felt like you were supposed to be uncomfortable, and that was the point, was to show an awful event that would propel a ordinary citizen to making those types of decisions that he made.
Yeah.
This time around, it took longer, involved the maid got passed around,
Mhm.
and then the daughter got taken elsewhere, and the daughter, well, she didn't get passed around, but she still got used again. And once she was done being used, she proceeds to run away, jump out of a window, and impale herself on a metal spike.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, the first one felt like it was uncomfortable for a point. I almost feel like that was like this one. All of those scenes were supposed to seem cool or like titillating somehow.
Yeah. It was really awful. Yeah, I don't know if they were being edgy for the sake of being edgy, or you know, I yeah, like I said, this was more exploitative, and I didn't like it at all.
Yeah, like for the first movie, what I'll say is that I would tell somebody who was squeamish about it, suffer through it. It makes context for the rest of the movie.
Hmm.
If somebody felt like they wanted to watch this one, I would probably just tell them, as soon as you see it, here's what happens. Here's your time scam for time stamp to where the movie proper can resume.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so after this, you know, Paul is, he's just obviously, he's kind of like, he's a bit like Michael Corleone in The Godfather 3. I try to get out and they pull me back in.
Yep. And so basically what happens next is that the first movie happens again. In fact, they even bring in the kind of lovable schlub police chief from the previous movie who
Yeah.
gets sent out. Was he the chief or just a detective?
I use a detective.
The
Yeah.
detective, that's right. They send out the lovable schlub police detective to Los Angeles to track him down because, oh well, if the LAPD realized that we let him get away, that's our jobs.
Mm.
Schlub police detective, you're a year away from retirement.
Yeah.
You won't get your pension.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I can't think of the last time I saw a sequel that was so blatantly just the first movie over again. I'm going to be honest.
The Hangover 2.
I have not seen either of the Hangover movies yet, but
Oh yeah.
that's the reputation.
Yeah. The Hangover 2 is basically the Hangover 1, except it's in Bangkok instead of Las Vegas.
I feel like that one had to be more different than this one was.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is that like where the first one felt like it had a message, this one felt like it wanted to pretend it had a message
Yeah.
because they kept throwing in like symbolism, but they didn't really like elaborate on it.
Yeah. They kind of do. They try to a little bit with, how should, um how should criminals be treated? Should they just be, locked away in prison, or should they be rehabilitated? They should, have
Mhm.
therapy and da 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 da. They touched on that a little bit, but not a lot.
It doesn't really impact the plot at all.
Yeah.
The only impact it has is that it's a wedge between him and his reporter girlfriend.
Yeah.
And even then, it's not like they don't really have it out because he's just very secretive about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things, and what he does when he's, tracking down the hoodlums, is he goes to, like, I don't know if it necessarily, if it was Skid Row or somewhere near Skid Row, and he
Awful lot of street churches for Skid Row.
yeah,
It was like on the edges of Skid Row.
probably, yeah. And he gets a little apartment, kind of like a little hideout for his nightly activities. Um, and he manages to track down one of them, and that's of course, the scene DB alluded to with the "Do you believe in Jesus? You're gonna meet him."
Yeah. I feel like one place where they're trying to get some symbolism in, and also just to kind of show how grimy it was that the place where these criminals were meeting up was just swarming with rats. Charles almost stepped on them a couple of times on his way padding down the steps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I will say the one difference between this movie and the first one was, in the first one, he didn't try to track down the people who attacked his family. In this one, he does.
Right. This is a
Yeah,
more laser directed revenge.
yeah, yeah. And I will say it doesn't get too over the top with the action scenes, like, like the next ones do, but it does feel a little lazy.
Yeah, like it's very much a retread. And most of the action scenes aren't all that interesting.
Yeah, and it very like really over the top death scenes. That somebody gets shot and they just be like, oh, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. So we got through one good one liner. I guess the last fight scene that takes place at that hospital. was kind of interesting. You,
Yeah.
you know what the big missed opportunity was? It's actually kind of similar to what we had to say about the Eurovision Song Contest one, which is weird with that as a tie-in, but here we go.
Yeah.
Um, much the same way that in that movie, the evil banker could have been more of a presence through the movie. Imagine if one of the hoodlums had been captured early on and was getting treatment at the facility. Like, instead of him being captured in the 11th hour, and then he just shows up after he's been there less than a day or so
Yeah.
to execute him. Imagine if it seemed like he was reforming, but it turned out like this movie is very much against the whole rehabilitation thing, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you wanted to make that point, early on, one of the criminals escapes him and into the long arms of the law. He gets put in there, and it looks like he's making steps towards recovery, but it turns out he's just playing the system and is, you know, dealing drugs out of the hospital pharmacy or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like Alex DeLarge in Clockwork Orange, where he's like, "Oh no, they think I'm reformed. I'm not really reformed."
Right. I just have that kind of thing, and that would have actually strengthened the theme of the movie, but that would have required filming multiple scenes at the hospital, which probably would have been expensive
Yeah.
because they would have had to build more than just the one section of the hospital. So there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, as we pointed out, yeah, the Canon films not really known for their big budgets.
Yeah. Where the movie also tries to pretend that it has something to really say, it keeps piling on the religious imagery,
Hmm. Yeah.
which very lazily done.
Yes. Um, and oh, and you mentioned the music in the first movie. What's funny is the music in this movie was done by Jimmy Page, guitarist for Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, and what's really funny about that, my comment as we were watching the opening of the movie was, wait a second, this is the soundtrack that they were always parodying on The Simpsons whenever they did McBain, with
Yeah.
like the generic rock doodling.
Yeah. Yeah,
In fact,
yeah. All those Simpsons references are finally starting to make sense.
yeah, like we watched 48 Hours and went, oh, this is where McBain came from. This is also kind of where McBain came from,
Yeah, yeah. And of course, Bronson has been heavily parodied on The Simpsons.
down to there being a Bronson, Missouri.
Missouri, yeah,
Yo, mom, I want some ice cream.
no dice.
This ain't over.
Yeah,
Speaking of Bronson, I feel like he was trying with the material he had.
yeah,
If I'm just being very fair, like he's not bad in it, but there isn't like there's like a I don't know. I felt like there was like this unspoken gravitas he brought to the first one that just wasn't here because the material didn't really lend itself to it.
no, and yeah, he's just kind of like walking around and trying to look tough and yeah, yeah. You could kind of tell he was just kind of like, okay, I got to do this for 100 grand. Ugh.
Ugh. Uh, uh, I, I got principles, but I also got a mortgage.
Yeah, yeah,
Speaking of principles, so we talked about how the one scene was very tawdry. The tawdry is not isolated to the one scene. Like,
no,
say he's busting up a drug den, and there's a high woman listening to a set of headphones, topless for no reason,
yeah.
and she was not hired for acting chops.
No.
He comes across the crooks in another scene, uh, trying to be violently violent with another woman and her husband.
Mm,
And darn, wouldn't you know it, he didn't show up in time to save her dress.
no.
What a coincidence.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, like, as memory serves, the first one really only had any sort of what you'd call like the R-rated material in that one scene.
Yeah.
This one, it's like, oh well, people like that, so we'll just sprinkle it throughout.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of a problem with a lot of Hollywood studios is they learned the wrong lesson for why a movie was good. You know, they think, oh well, they like that movie because of this. It's like,
Right.
well, so we just need to
Uh,
put more of that in there.
Look, it's Charles Bronson going around shooting down hoodlums of varying ethnicities. Uh,
Yeah.
and the hoodlums have no personality outside of wanting to hood.
Yeah.
And uh, I would almost say that in like some of the violently violent scenes, there were some undertones with some of the African American members of the gang that seemed a little suspect to me. I don't know.
Yeah. This was the 1980s. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but anyways, yeah, like we'll have Charles Bronson. He'll have his daughter raped, and he's on the path for revenge. And uh, we'll have sex and nudity and violence, and it'll be all the things people want. And that will basically make the same movie over again, but more. That'll be
Yeah.
better, right?
Mm.
No
Yeah.
dice.
No dice. Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of made the comparison with this franchise with the Rambo franchise because it kind of both of these franchises kind of took a similar trajectory where like the first movie had like a message to it, even though it was violent, it had a lot of action in it, but it had like it had a message to it, had commentary, it had
A point.
a point, yeah. And then the sequels are just like, oh, well, people like Rambo, Sylvester Stallone, going around shooting people with a big gun, and
What if we did more of that?
well, yeah, let's just do more of that, yeah. You know, like, well, let's do Rambo 2. Oh, okay, well, we'll send him to Vietnam. Okay, yeah, and then, well, what about Rambo 3? Well, let's send him to Afghanistan. Do the exact same same movie.
Right. Meanwhile, this is like a weird halfway house because I suspect if we eventually get to Death Wish 3 that we will have a good time with it because
Yeah,
it will be over the top and crazy and just embrace it. But this movie's like a weird halfway point that just doesn't quite work, unfortunately.
no, it doesn't. Yeah,
So, darn it, my friends knew better. I should have listened to them and just skipped right to
it's,
3. But it was that one line that I saw in a review ages ago that has stuck in my mind. Do
yeah,
you believe in Jesus? Well, you're going to meet him. And it wasn't even all that epic in the moment. So
no, it wasn't. Yeah,
it's like when I watched Animal House all over again, where I had seen all of the moments taken out of context, and in context they didn't seem as grand
yeah,
because I was getting like the most punchy moment of it, you know, hundreds of times over the years versus, and
yeah,
it was the same thing with this one.
yeah.
Ah, well,
Oh well, yeah, yeah. Can't win them all.
yeah.